Hey Rebecca, so I'm going to show you how to work with scan data in Zbrush, specifically combining sets of scan data. So the first thing to do is to import the file. If it's OBJ, you go to this import button on the top right corner, hit that, find your file, so in my downloads, select your OBJ and press open. If the file is an STL, you'll have to go up to Zplugin, 3D Print Hub, Import STL. But for OBJs, you do it through this import button. Next up, we're going to import a second file. I had a look at the ones you sent me, and some of them were in a format called FBX. So I'm going to show you how to import those. So we duplicate our one object. We then go to Zplugin, FBX ImportExport, import, let's just check our options. Yeah, we don't need any of that, so import. This one is an FBX, so press open. Okay, and then let's just duplicate that and append in our OBJ. And now they're both, the OBJ and the FBX are in the same workspace. I just realised that I didn't need to duplicate that, so I'm just going to press this delete button. Okay, so theoretically they should both be visible, but I'm guessing that they are in different locations in the document. So I'm going to press this frame button, and I can see here that my OBJ is massive over here and my FBX is tiny over there. So the first thing I want to do is scale and position these. So I'm going to make just one of them visible by pressing this eyeball icon. Then I'm going to go to scale, unlock scale and center it to my mesh, if it lets me. Why is it not letting me do that? Okay, so instead I'll just drag it and make sure I'm positioning it in the middle. Switch off the lock, and then I'm just going to scale this down. And I basically want to get it small and moved over onto this platform. If your platform's not visible, you need to have this floor button highlighted as orange. So I'm basically just going to try and orientate it. This is one of the annoying things about downloading scan data off the internet, is that sometimes it's completely in the wrong orientation. So I'm just going to have to keep fiddling around with this. Okay. Switch off perspective. Okay, and I'm just going to shrink it down a little bit more. Okay, great. So our one file is nicely positioned on our kind of workspace. I'm going to switch on the second file and see if I can locate that. So that's up there. So again, I'm going to try and okay, so this one's really tiny. So dragging the middle yellow square to make them similar size. Now the FBX quality of the scan seems to be like really a lot lower than your OBJ ones. So maybe from the archive that you're downloading from, try to find the OBJ, the files that are saved as OBJs, because it seems like the ones that are FBX are like a lot less detailed. But for the sake of demonstrating this process, I'm just going to work with these two, but yeah, we can see there's a real big difference in the quality of the scans of both of these things. Okay, so basically we've imported them and then we've scaled and positioned them in a kind of workable orientation. At the moment, if we switch on polyframe to look at the surface of these models, we can see that they have quite different surfaces. So I'm going to focus on one of these at a time. So with a surface like this, if we try to manipulate it, so let's just bring up a basic clay brush, if we begin to try and manipulate this, you'll see it's not really having any impact. And the reason for that is that the polyframe is not dense enough. It's like got hardly any polyframes. So the way that we correct this is to do something called Dynamesh, which stands for dynamic mesh, and that's where we turn triangles, so these four-sided triangles, into four-sided shapes called chords. So we go into Geometry, Dynamesh, switch off Blur, let's give ourselves a resolution of, let's try 400, and hit Dynamesh. And you'll see now that the surface is these quads. It's a bit too much of a dense surface, so I'm just going to Command Z and go backwards. And I'm just going to try this lower resolution. Okay, that's better. So before we set it to 600 and it had a very dense mesh and its active point count went up to 2 million. With a slightly lower resolution, we're getting a bit of a nicer surface to work with, not too dense. And this will now allow us, if we want to begin to manipulate the surface. Let's see what's going on there. It doesn't seem to be working. Okay, yeah. So yeah, we can begin to use our brushes if we want to on this object now. Shift is smoothing, and our different brushes are here, so there's lots of different types that you can play around with. I'm not sure what's going on with my clay build-up brush. Yeah, but you can have a play around with different brushes. If you need to undo at any point, just Command C. So Dynamesh this one, and now we're going to go to the other one. I'm going to perform the exact same thing. This surface almost looks like it's Dynameshed, but it isn't in fact. It still has a surface made up of small triangles. So again, if we tried to edit the surface, we would see that it would very quickly begin to like fragment like this, which we don't want. And that's caused by the triangles stretching in a kind of weird way. So again, what we want to do is to Dynamesh. So go to Geometry and set it to, let's say, 200, hit Dynamesh, and then it's now got a quad surface. So again, if we used Move, our surface doesn't fragment as much. If our surface does start to fragment, all you have to do is press Dynamesh off and then back on, and you'll see that it fixes it, and you can continue like sculpting and manipulating it. Now, in terms of combining these two shapes together, it's a relatively straightforward process. What I'd recommend you do to start with is duplicate each of these layers. We call them subtools, and you can also reorder them. And I would have these ones as backups, so I'd call them like scan 1 backup, scan 2 backup. And so we've got these ones that we're not going to edit to begin with, just as like safekeeping in the background. We'll switch off their visibility of the eyeballs, and then we can start to work with these two. So the best way to combine these is to basically, before merging them together, is just to get them in the exact position that you want them. So I'm just using the Move button here. You can also scale these, so if you pull the yellow one, it will do it uniformly. So like this, and if you pull one of these square ones, it will scale it on that particular axis. So if you're pressing the squares, you can rotate by pulling on the like circular thing. So yeah, you might just want to play around a bit with that, and you could also like duplicate these, so you could duplicate it, reset this thing. You know, you could start to do like multiple kind of things with these shapes, you know, just play around a bit, I suppose. When you're happy with like all the positioning and stuff, all you need to do is merge them down and Dynamesh them all together. So to do that, you go to merge, merge down, and Dynamesh those. So Dynamesh off, Dynamesh on. So that's fused these two together. Like those are now a single subtool. And then we'll just go merge down, and geometry, Dynamesh off, Dynamesh on. And this is now a solid object. These are now fused together. So if, for example, we did like a half view, I'm just holding down Control Shift. If we did a half view, and switch on double display, these are like now completely joined in with each other, like they are a single surface. And that also means that if you now used your brushes, it would affect both of the designs. Yeah, they're kind of like fused together. You could also use like the shift to kind of smooth them in more, for example. So that's one way that you could merge them. Another thing that you might want to play around with is something called the Deformation Menu. So I'm just going to drop down to this guy again. I'll back up, duplicate him, and go up here, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to scale him down a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is play around with deformation. Deformation is this menu here, and it's basically just all these different sliders. And if you pull on a slider, it's going to begin to play around with your object. Yeah. And then you could, same as before, like play around with that, and you know, position it with your other objects. And as long as they're touching, when you merge down in Dynamesh, it will attach them all together. So yeah, you could start to do some quite weird stuff with this. You know, some weird like shapes. And then when you're happy with what you've got, you just go to the top layer, merge down, geometry, Dynamesh off, Dynamesh on. And again, it will have merged it in. You can see there's kind of like this seam line. And again, if you use like a brush, it's going to affect all of it. If you hold down Shift, you can also adjust the draw size. You could begin to like merge this in. So yeah, that's kind of like a nice way to manipulate objects with the Deformation menu, which is here. And there's like loads of different things you can do with deformation. So let's say we take this guy, our safekeeping, duplicate it, move it up. Let's move it over to the side. Yeah, there's loads. You've got like bend, like, oh, that's kind of doing slightly weird stuff. You can also, you don't just use the sliders, you've got these little icons, X, Y, Z. If you change those, it also affects like how the edit happens. So let's try bend on the X. Yeah, I'm not, okay, so this bend one's not so interesting. Let's try a more interesting one. Let's try squeeze. Yeah, so that's, I mean, it does pretty crazy stuff. What if we just squeeze it on the Y? Yeah, it does like pretty crazy manipulations. It looks kind of wacky, right? My advice to you is to look at your polyframe as well and just make sure that everything looks clean. Just be aware, like, very thin things like this won't print well, so just keep that in mind. If you like warp stuff too much, if you did like this, that kind of stuff is never ever going to print. So try not to go too crazy, or just be aware like that there won't print. So if I wanted to use that, I would maybe like try and so maybe something like, you know, if it sinks into my model a bit. And then, sorry, I've made something quite terrifying. Obviously you can spend a lot more time doing something a bit nicer than, than the scary thing that I've created. But this now is all like joined together. Again, if I show you like a half view, like this is all a single object once you've performed that Dynamesh. So Dynameshing is quite important, and smoothing in. Hey, I'm doing a tutorial, sorry, one sec. Sorry about that, someone just walked in the room. Yeah, so you can continue to like smooth these guys in. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for like combining scan data. And what you could even do is, like once you've combined loads, you could even duplicate that again and, you know, go into the Defamation menu and do weird stuff. So like inflate, what other stuff have you got? Yeah, you could do some really crazy stuff with this. Yeah, you can just keep doing different designs and stuff. When you're happy with the design, one thing I will say is do keep saving. So when you save in Zbrush, do File, Save As. Don't do Document Save. Do File, Save As, and just make sure that you're saving it as something you'll remember. And whenever you save, don't overwrite the same files. So save it, and then if you're going to do another save, you'll want to go File, Save As, and just like create a new file, because if you overwrite the same file again and again, it will corrupt after a while. So just always save with a new, like a new save title. Yeah, when it comes to exporting, make sure everything is Dynamesh together, so you've got a single mesh. And then what we want to do is bring down the active point count and the density of our surface. So I can help you with this on Monday, but in the meantime, if you want to have a go at it, again, I would duplicate your piece and I would rename it. So I'd call it like, I don't know, Design 1 Decimated. So you've got your original, which is this one, and then you've got this version that you're going to kind of reduce for 3D printing. And then you're just basically going to go to Zplugin, Decimation Master, and you're going to select 250,000. And hopefully what that will do is reduce the complexity of the topology and bring this figure down to 250. And ideally it will do it in a way that doesn't affect the quality of the 3D design. Once you've done this decimation process, you can't go back in with your brushes, so like your move and everything, you don't want to do that once you've decimated. That's why we keep this like backup version here. So if we want to do any more changes, we can just use this one. This version we're no longer going to want to edit. You can see here that the surface has changed back to triangles. But the actual surface quality between 782,000 and 250,000, you'll see it's not actually that noticeable to the naked eye. if you switch off polyframe. So the high and the low, like you can't really tell the difference, but it means that when we export, the file will be a lot smaller and easier for the next software to handle. We could even decide to drop this lower, in which case we'll go to Zplugin, Decimation, and we'll go down another layer. I would say start with 250,000 and just gradually bring it down. So I'm going to hit 150. No problem, and I can't really see any difference to the naked eye. If I switch on polyframe mode, maybe our triangles are a little bit bigger now. Yeah, so the triangles at 150 are a little bit larger and there's less of them than at 250. They're a bit smaller and more confined. We could even try dropping down to 75,000. Yeah, again, bigger triangles. And again, we can do a surface comparison between 250 and 75,000. It is a little bit noticeable. You see it slightly changes. So I would maybe go for 150 and I would stick to that. When you're happy with your decimation number, Zplugin menu again. This time we open 3D Print Hub. First thing we want to do is update size ratios and just pick which one is like most close to like a real life scale that we want to work with. So I'm going to go like smaller rather than larger. We will scale this in our 3D printing software again, but it's just worthwhile doing a bit of scaling in Zbrush. So yeah, something like this is fine. We're then going to go to, still in 3D Print Hub, go to Export Options. Make sure you only have selected, so what to export selected, because we only want it to export the subtool that we're currently working with. So selected, switch off polypaint and go export to OBJ. And then let's just call this design one. We'll press save. And then next week I will show you the slicing of the file in Cura. So Cura is the 3D printing software, which I will have showed you in the induction. But basically, yeah, we'll just pull that OBJ into Cura and we'll pick our print settings. So our layer height, our infill, all that kind of stuff. And we can do all our scaling and things like that in here. So, you know, if we make this 15 centimeters, yeah, all of this stuff next week I will show you in person, but I'm just basically trying to demonstrate that like it's a pretty straightforward process. Yeah, we will be able to do this kind of side of things next week. But yeah, so let me know how you get on. I hope you find it okay in ZBrush. If you have any questions or need to troubleshoot, just drop me an email and I'll be happy to help.